Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit now about shutter speed, get into detail what exactly that is. So if you recall on the Minolta, the shutter speed dial, the dial is right here in the front, and if I turn it, I can see the shutter speed showing up in the window. So it's at 125, 60, 30, etc. On the Vivitar camera, the shutter speed dial is right here. So this is at 2000, 1500, etc., etc. So let's start talking about what these are and how they work. I'm going to do something with the camera that you generally don't want to do. It's bad for the camera to do this because it lets dust in and you can damage it, but I'm going to be very careful to show you. So I'm going to, hang on, I'm going to take off the lens in the front so I can see the inside of the camera, and I'm going to be very careful not to touch anything in there because the mechanics are very delicate. So I'm grasping the camera, and I'm going to open up the back of the camera, which you will do at some point to load film in your camera, but for now, know that you want to be really careful because this curtain here, the shutter speed curtain, that's what this is called, is extremely delicate. So here's what I want to show you. So I have my camera set at 1/2000th of a second. Now, 1/2000th of a second, that's what that stands for. That's a fraction. All these are fractions. So this is 1/1000th, 1/500th, 1/250th, 1/125th, etc., etc. It's interesting enough that the larger the number, the faster the shutter speed time is. But don't take my word for it. Let's actually see it in action. So when I press the shutter release button, I don't even know if you'll see this firing initially because 1/2000th of a second is so fast. So see if you can catch it. Okay, I just fired, and I think I saw something, but it was hard to see. I'll do that one more time at the fastest shutter speed time I can make it. Wow, that was so fast, I couldn't even see it. I'm going to bump this down to 1/1000th of a second and do it again. Okay, again, way too fast for me. Here's 1/500th of a second, so that's now a quarter of the speed of 1/2000th of a second, but still pretty fast. Here we go. All right, I did start to see something flash. I'm going to bring this down to 1/125th of a second. So, all right, something starting to happen. Let's bring it down to 1/30th of a second. Oops. And, okay, I definitely saw that. Here's 1/8th of a second. Okay, that I definitely saw. And that was considerably slower. 1/2 of a second, I know I'm going to see this. Oh yeah, definitely saw that. So you can see it opens up and then 1/1, which is just 1 second. So here we go. So the shutter speed curtain stays open for the entire time. If you put it on B or bulb, right? The way this works is if you hold the shutter release button down, this will stay open for as long as you hold this down. So in theory, you could take a picture that is, you know, takes 20 minutes or 4 hours or several days if you even wanted to, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. But this allows you to take a much longer exposure time. So I'm going to go ahead and let go of the button, and when I do, the curtain closes. There's a special cord you can use, so you don't have to hold it the whole time. But that's the shutter speed dial in a nutshell. So you're going to want to write down these times if you haven't already done so, knowing that 2000 is actually the fastest shutter speed time, and 1 is the slowest shutter speed time, and then B is variable depending on how long. It's not necessarily the slowest because I could press this for less time than 1 second, but it lets me keep it open for an extended period of time. Other things to know, when I set it to 1/2000th of a second, I'm not letting in a whole lot of light. Okay, this is letting in less light. So as I go down this way, I'm letting in more and more light. And that is something that's going to be really useful depending on the lighting situation that I'm in. When you change your shutter speed, you can change the quality of a photo. So in this case, you can see this drop of water looks like it's been frozen and is being in place. It's not what we would normally see with the human eye. Here's another great example of an incredible photographer taking in a photo of a sports event. So on your camera, when you alter these shutter speed times, if you want something to look like it's frozen, like that drop of water, or the sports photographer where the person looks like they're frozen, you're going to want to use a fast shutter speed. So 2000, 1500 are typically what photographers will use to freeze and make it look like their subject matter is standing still or frozen in the air, or that water droplet is frozen in the air. So these fast shutter speed times, 500, 1000, 2000, are the times that you would use to do that. But sometimes photographers want to specifically create an event where they blur the motion and make it look as if things are moving and showing an intentional blur. Things are not frozen. This looks like it was frozen, but actually this is a shot of the water at a very slow shutter speed time. And here's another great example of an intentional blur. Obviously with a dog, looks like they probably just had a bath or something, and he or she is, just ringing off. So anytime that there's a motion event like this, so how do you get shots to look something like this? To get a blurred shot, what you need to do is move your shutter speed down, and actually the slower it is, the more it's going to blur. To show the shots that I just showed you that had kind of like a blur, those are typically taken, and again, it's not a hard and fast rule. You really have to experiment with it to find out what the best timing is, but usually they're around 1/15 of a second. Remember, we're talking about fractions of a second. 1/8 and 1/4 and even 1/2 of a second are typically used to get those kinds of motion blur shots. And you can get some amazing photography with those. The trick though is that because you're getting a motion blur, you're going to need to use something called a tripod or keep your camera steady. And I'll show you a picture of what a tripod looks like, but you usually would put the camera on the tripod, or sometimes what I'll do if I'm out and about in the field, just taking a photo and I don't have a tripod and I want to use some of these slower shutter speed times, is I'll find a stable surface like a table or, whatever's around me. Sometimes it's a fence post, and I'll take that photo while holding the camera steady in that way. So here's a great example of how shutter can really alter a photo. On the photo on the left, the wheel was still turning, you can see by the water, but that's a fast shutter speed time. And the photo on the right, there was clearly an intentional blur that happened, so there was a slower shutter speed time. So photo on the left was probably around 1/1000th of a second, 1/1000th of a second. And the photo on the right, I'm guessing just by what I'm seeing here, was probably taken around 1/15th of a second. Dramatically different results, exactly same shot, right? Same movement and everything.